I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of the Top 10 of the 2010s, and welcome to a new genre. For the next 3 weeks, we're going to be talking about the sci-fi fantasy genre. Starting off with this episode, giving my picks for sort of some honorable mentions and my picks from 10 to 7 of some of the best sci-fi movies of the decade. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss video, so you can see my picks for 6 to 2, which is going to happen next week, and then the final week after that, I'm going to be dedicating one video to my favorite science fiction / fantasy movie of the decade. And then, every 3 weeks there's going to be a new genre, so maybe you're not a big sci-fi fantasy guy, so next week you want to stay tuned for documentaries or comedies. I mean, there's going to be so many more genres upcoming, so I hope you enjoy the series so far, and always let me know in the comments down below some of your favorite sci-fi fantasy movies, or whatever the related genre is. So, like I said, at the action video, that sometimes movies don't fit into one genre, they'll fit into a couple different genres, and sci-fi is one of those. A lot of people consider sci-fi actually not a genre but a setting. That Alien, for example, is sci-fi horror. That it's not really a sci-fi movie, it's just horror but it's set in space. I disagree with that notion, and for the most part I think there are some movies that definitely fit into the sci-fi element, and especially fantasy. Once you group into that, I think that's definitely a genre. So it's sort of a mix of both these two things, and I felt there was a need for its own episode. But as a result, there's probably some movies that were in the action video that you thought were sci-fi, something like The Edge of Tomorrow or Upgrade, that are sci-fi movies, but I consider them action movies. There were some action movies that I left off the action list because I thought they were a little bit more sci-fi. Maybe are showing up on the list here. Without further ado, here are my honorable mentions, starting off with The Hobbit.
Home is now behind you. The world is ahead.
I'm a big fan of the Lord of the Rings series, and while the Hobbit trilogy wasn't the artistic success that the Lord of the Rings trilogy was, it still doesn't mean there wasn't anything to love. And with regards to fantasy goes, this decade was definitely sort of the merger of fantasy to television. We had the massive successes like Game of Thrones, but then you can also talk about Marco Polo or Vikings or other sort of fantasy big properties that are now being moved to television. And I think, even Lord of the Rings, this decade is going to have the Amazon Lord of the Rings series, which is going to be this big, massive TV series. So it's kind of sad that the fantasy is sort of moving away from movies, but I do think it is fitted very well for television. That being said, I still really love this movie because I love the world of Middle-earth, and I love going back into it. I love seeing Hobbiton. I love seeing new different places that we didn't really explore in the Lord of the Rings, at least in the movies. The general consensus is that the second one is the best, but I personally prefer this one because of that sort of connection to Hobbiton, the introduction of these dwarves, which I thought they did a great job sort of distinctifying each of the dwarves. It's crucial to understand who's who and sort of the power dynamics at play. And I think Martin Freeman's portrayal as Bilbo, and just getting to know a little bit more about Bilbo from this story, is really informative and impactful, and then helps influence the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I liked how there was actually a 3-part story within this movie that didn't just feel like a setup, that actually did have a bit of a payoff at the end with promise to come for the future, because we know this is a trilogy, of course, but I still think this first movie was still a satisfying watch. There's some great scenes, like at the end, the big sort of battle at the edge of the cliff. I thought it was just sort of, as a location, very interesting, and how it plays out with the trees and whatnot. And then simultaneously at the same time we have a Bilbo scene with Gollum, and that sort of riddle battle back and forth, battle of the wits, is just a really beautiful sort of paced and written dialogue scene. At the time, it suffered from being compared with The Lord of the Rings and all the introduction of this more CGI that The Lord of the Rings didn't have, and experimenting with frame rates. But I think if you take a step back, it is, while not The Lord of the Rings, a very charming, wonderful world, great action set pieces, some interesting character dynamics, fantasy movie. And if you're a fan of fantasy, I still recommend these movies, and I still sort of appreciate these movies, and I still enjoy them. Maybe it's because I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan, but at the end of the day, this is my list, so I had to put The Hobbit on there. And my next honorable mention is Holy Motors.
Qu'est-ce qui vous pousse à continuer, Oscar?
Pour la beauté du geste.
La beauté, on dit qu'elle est dans l'œil. Dans l'œil de celui qui regarde.
Alors si personne ne regarde plus...
one of the strangest and most unique movies I have ever seen. I guess it's about a man who is an actor who goes from job to job, performing and being these characters in front of no audience really, and we don't know who it's for. It's for somebody or someone or some group, and really just the tonal shifts in this movie are unlike anything I've ever seen because of how it goes from each different character to in between riding the limo and sort of the different dimensions, and how the film never gives you anything, just sort of puts you in these scenarios, these sort of absurdist scenarios with extreme characters, and they're always extreme and always on different opposite sides and surreal in a lot of ways, and there's never really a sense of consequence or of impact of who's who and what the worlds are. We are sort of constantly just entering into these new worlds with these interesting ideas, and then of course really anchored by the central performance played by Dennis Levant as the actor who goes to each different sort of task and job of the day and does his job, and then when the final ending sort of happens, you realize something about the beginning, and this is not really a super story-driven or explanative sort of movie where everything's clear and there's a sort of clear progression. It's surreal. It's a little bit different than reality. It's not going to give you everything about the clues. It's less of cinema as a storytelling device and more cinema as an art piece, and trying to convey emotion, trying to shock you or disturb you, or just presenting ideas. Either you could interpret it as presenting a blank canvas of which you project your own ideas onto, or maybe it's just presenting themes and discussions, and it's not going to explain it for you, and it's not going to give Leos Carax his opinion on the film and what he thinks. It's all going to be about presenting these ideas and these themes and then allowing you to sort of try to intellectualize or try to understand them and try to put yourself onto the movie, or just, but also I think to be enjoyed is just a really crazy sort of fun ride of these different jobs that are so absurd and so unique and really unlike anything I've seen this decade. And really I guess the only way you could describe it and categorize it is a fantasy, is fantastical. I found a hard time putting it, which genres, but it's a movie I definitely really like and one that has stuck with me. So I thought that this would be a good place for it here on this list. My third honorable mention is Ready Player One.
Like many of you, I only came here to escape. But I found something much bigger than just myself. Are you willing to fight?
Help us save the Oasis.
A movie that I really connected to that maybe not a lot of people have. I think, sort of maybe pretty good to mixed critical review at the time, but for some reason I think I really connected to this movie. I think in one part it's because I read the book going into it and I really appreciate the adaptation of the story. I think a lot of people, what they want from their book adaptations is the exact same story but on film, but I kind of recognize that they're two different mediums, and therefore I appreciated that it was its really own story, that it came to a similar endpoint, but the way it got there was completely different, but still try to retain the soul of the book. And what's really great about these sort of movies is the world that it creates, and this is a really unique world, a VR utopia that's all sort of run on nostalgia, and where the book talks about more the scariness of that realization, the movie doesn't, which was a little bit disappointing, but as it's just an entertaining blockbuster with a great world, and Spielberg, he's only directed action a couple times in this decade. You sort of take what you can get because he reminds you that he's a really incredible action filmmaker. That beginning car chase scene is really great. That scene, the recreation of that movie, I don't want to spoil it, but there's a recreation of a movie within the movie, and it's really fun and entertaining and a blast, and there's a mystery element. And as a video games, at least adjacent kind of a movie, fulfills that video game vibe. I also think it works well in sort of the Goonies, almost Stand By Me element of the power of kids and using that sort of kids against the world element that Spielberg has done before with his association with something like Goonies. And it was a really entertaining, fun blockbuster that I appreciated because I read the book, but I liked the world. And I think if you're reading a really good list, there's probably one movie there on the list or in the honorable mentions that is totally different and wouldn't be on any other list. I feel like Ready Player One's kind of mine for that because I enjoyed it a lot more than, I guess, the average person, and that just means that the list is unique, and that's what I try to do, is give my unique personal opinions, and not just what is considered the best, but what I think is the best sci-fi movies of the decade. Then, another honorable mention, remember we're doing 5, so this is the 4th honorable mention, is Scott Pilgrim vs. the World.
What are you doing? Getting a life.
You want to fight me for her? Why on earth would you want to do that?
Because I'm in love with her.
Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, one of the defining cult movies of the decade, which I think has sort of slipped now into mainstream from the great director Edgar Wright. It is a sort of hard to classify video game, action, romance, fantasy kind of a movie. Ultimately, I put it in here because I didn't feel like it was super romance, but it has a lot of action. It was really hard to classify, so I put it in here because of sort of the fantastical elements, because it's not the sort of real life world. It's a comic book kind of a world based off the Scott Pilgrim graphic novels. And what's so great about the movie is the sort of way it reinvents how you look at movies, and it's a different kind of movie art form. It's almost a blend with something like the video games because of its brilliant scene transitions, or its on-screen text, or its use of just sound effects and sort of bleeding of scenes and fantastical elements. You know, Scott Pilgrim will walk into a bathroom and then walk out, and you know, it's some other place. I think it's aged really well, and it's something that when people do watch it, they really like it because of its quick pace and its sort of video game type aesthetic. I struggle a little bit because I wasn't a super big fan of Scott as a protagonist, as a character. But that being said, it's still, I would argue, one of the best directed maybe movies of the decade. It is so meticulously crafted. There's so many details in the background. There's so many video essays really talking about the actual craft and breaking down a lot of what makes this movie so interesting, and the amount of detail and care that seems like a graphic novel taken from the comics and put into a movie, but still allowing to have that sort of movie aesthetic and pacing. I think it's one of the most visually infectious movies of the decade, and really maybe that I've ever seen. It's very entertaining, it's very engaging, and it's a movie I definitely really enjoyed, and I recommend to a lot of people for sure, and such a well-directed movie. So big props to Edgar Wright and his success here. Then my final honorable mention is Snowpiercer.
I'm not a leader.
You're already a leader.
This is your destiny.
Another great director's take on sci-fi, although Bong Joon-ho is really known for his genre movies, and once again in the sort of action post-apocalyptic genre. This was my first introduction to director Bong and his ability to really tell a unique and interesting story, and almost a precursor in a lot of ways to Parasite. And I'd actually recommend a lot of people, of course, to watch Parasite, but if you've seen Parasite, you've won Best Picture, you want to see more of what he's done, I'd probably go Snowpiercer, because I think it's an easy English language, it's easy to get into, and the sci-fi really element, you know, for the most part, people, what I, at least for myself, appreciate sci-fi for is it allows for a barrier to comment on humanity and sort of have these political conversations that we maybe would have been too hard to digest in a traditional drama. That allowing that sort of barrier allows it to be almost like a mirror to reflect back onto society, and using allegory as a way to sort of better digest or just better illustrate the example. And this is a very obvious example of this. The sci-fi elements are kind of, they're there obviously, but the symbolism and the allegories are very obvious and very clear. This is sort of about a post-apocalyptic world where the human race is on a train and they can't go outside because it's too cold and they can't live out there. And the people in the back of the train are poor, and the people at the front of the train, the creator, you know, it's sort of a very obvious sort of linear class divide, where the middle of the train is the middle class, bottom of the train is the poorer class, based off a French novel. So that has that, it's not a completely original idea, but the amount of craft that Bong does to this film, the way he moves his camera from left to right, if Parasite is his staircase movie, his up and down movie. Parasite is his side to side, his left to right movie. And it's all about moving forward, always moving from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen, and progressing and continuing and not going back. And these sort of revolution, and then the larger intellectual themes and the rich with symbolism and metaphor themes of revolution and of losing your way and who's the true villain, and you know, all these different things that you can watch the movie and really connect to on an intellectual level, and then some of the emotions as you get more connected to these characters. It's a very interesting and thought-provoking movie, and also a very entertaining movie, and really a sign that shows that when I first saw this movie, it was sort of an underseen gem of the year, and I'm glad that Bong Joon-ho won for Parasite, because now people can go back and watch some of his other movies. Snowpiercer of one I highly recommend. Then going into my 10th pick is Dawn of the Planet of the Apes.
War, it's not what you want. There must be another way.
War has already begun.
Apes on horses. Do I need to say more? Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, the second in the reboot of the Planet of the Apes franchise, a sort of prequelizing of it. I'm a big fan of the Planet of the Apes series, the originals, and I'm really glad with how this series and this trilogy really works out, and I'm a big fan of really all three of these movies, but Dawn being my personal favorite. I like its approach to a grounded, real sort of sci-fi and what would really happen, and how did this sort of simian overtaking occur. And this was really never possible with not the advancement of technology and of CGI and of motion capture. And CGI is without a doubt the most prominent effect in this decade, and especially with these sci-fi fantasy movies that we very rarely see the practical effects anymore. Where the 2000s there was some practical effects and introduction of CGI. I think the 2010s was sort of the defining era of this is a thing that's going to be around, and we've sort of reached the point where it's acceptable. So much so that I think these effects really hold up, and the connection of Caesar and Koba and all the apes, and there's multiple apes and different types of them, and really have them sort of lead a film, and that's the sort of balance of the film, of the apes versus the humans. And naturally I connect to the humans, even though I feel like some of their backstories are sort of hard to connect to, and I never really connected with them. I still appreciate the performances by Jason Clarke and Kerry Russell and Gary Oldman, a really scene-stealing performance. I like how the apes, while they're still talking, you know, it's still very a grounded, realist kind of a movie, and they still struggle with some of the things that humans deal with, which is about power and control and desire, and how there's bad apes and there's good apes and there's good humans and there's bad humans, and sort of the bad humans and the bad apes sort of ruin things for a lot of them. Just that philosophical debate that's going on with the apes of how they should interact with the humans. But because we know where this is going to go, the film has a sort of melancholy aspect. We know what's going to happen already, so that makes those human stories much more honest and heartfelt and heart-wrenching, but they're more impactful. Those human moments are more impactful because we know they're fleeting. And then when we sort of get the final big action sequences, the big attack at the end, it is grand and devastating, and I think it sort of lingers on for too long, and it loses some of its momentum at the end. But still, that sort of, so I think it's a couple pieces away from being a masterpiece, and those moments of real human connection, whether it be Andy Serkis's performance as Caesar, or Toby Kebbell's performance as Koba, that sort of physical and interesting power balance and sort of battle for power really has me coming back again and again, and really connecting to those moments, and just even the visual imagery of the visual cues of sort of the darkness with the individual sources of light in the camp of the apes versus the camp of the humans, sort of showing the sort of symbolism of the symmetry there. But then of course also the just visual iconography of an ape on a horse with a machine gun running towards you. It's an epic kind of an image, and I think Matt Reeves is really great at creating some of those images, so I'm interested to see what he does next. With the Batman film, so despite my issues with it, the parts that are really fantastic with the movie have stuck with me since I saw it in 2014 and have me keep coming back to the movie. Then my number 9 pick is Bumblebee.
This is how we stop them. You've got me. And I'm not going anywhere.
Another movie where, similar to maybe Ready Player One, I liked more than everyone else, so much so that I think it's of the best of the decade. A movie I really liked when it came out, and I've since, in 2018, rewatched it a bunch of times actually, so I've been able to revisit that way. And at the time, it was sort of seen as, oh no, this is one of the best Transformers movies, but for a lot of people, that isn't a good enough recommendation. But I'm here to tell you that it is not just one of the best Transformers movies, it's a capital G great movie. Now, maybe I'm a little bit biased because I'm actually a fan of the Transformers movies. I think what Michael Bay did with those movies is to develop this unique style of chaotic action that is epic, and what he does with the effects is unlike any other filmmaker. He's really a pure auteur in that sense, and I've appreciated what he's done, and I've liked a lot of the Transformers movies. But Bumblebee is a different kind of movie. What Travis Knight does is really break it down to the simplistics of storytelling, that there's only one Transformer, there's one human, and we haven't really seen that human-Transformer connection since the first one, so it brings that sort of humanism and that sort of connection between the Transformer and the human back together. Of course, an ode to the 80s and some of the original Transformer series. It has sort of a, we'll call it generic, sort of cheesy 80s kind of vibe to it, but it could have been really sort of failure if it didn't have a great actress, but it did. It had Haley Steinfeld, and she was able to bring in honesty and a realism. So it's not a sort of cheesy 80s storyline, that it gives some real connection to it. And it's yes, part Iron Giant, you know, part Transformer, part E.T. even, but works in all those senses. It's a great sort of, those moments with Haley and Bumblebee are really heartfelt and earnest in a way that few films really tackle and are successful at. And then even something like the action, using them to transform into the action, using actual transforming ability of the Transformers in the action in clever ways. And just the simplistics of, there's a yellow Transformer and that's Bumblebee, and there's a red one and there's a blue one and they're bad, and you can clearly see them in the fighting. So the clarity of the action is much higher. It's not as complicated as something like Michael Bay's movies. So in a different way, it's stripped down, but it's focused, it's linear, it's clear, great action, honest, heartfelt storytelling. As a Transformers fan, I was super pleased. It's a movie I keep on going back to because of its good-natured energy and ease and efficiency of storytelling. And I appreciate all those different elements of Bumblebee, and it's a movie I still, even if you're not a Transformers fan, I still recommend it to you. Then my number 8 pick is The Martian.
Do you realize how crazy this is?
We had no other option.
No matter what happens, tell the world, tell my family that I never stop fighting to make it home.
A great movie for these quarantine times because it's literally about a guy who gets stuck on Mars by himself and has to work with his team, his team back home, and with the world to unite for this greater good cause. It's an optimistic look at least these coronavirus times in an indirect kind of a way. But this is a movie that, like Ready Player One, I read the book going into, and I appreciate the adaptation similarly to Ready Player One because of its sort of distinction from the book, and where the book had these sort of only book-like things where they went down the math and explained it one by one and told you everything of actually the specifics and the process of how to do it. The Martian does this a thing where they have these montages where it works as a pseudo-narration, but it's really just Matt Damon, his character Mark Watney, explaining his process to the video log for sort of, you know, for prosperity and to keep himself sane, I guess, in a lot of ways too. And the movie works in these sort of great montage sequences where it's about the process. And many times, I think I appreciate movies and connect to movies that work on the details and the specifics of the process of how things work and the rules and of whatnot. For example, Goodfellas is a movie that I really appreciate because it really breaks down what the mafia is, why it exists, and how it works and the inner workings throughout it. And similarly, The Martian does the same thing, where it's very entertaining just seeing the process of how things work, of how you're stuck on Mars, you have some of this food, how are you going to survive for this foreseeable future until you get connection, and just that process, and actually using optimism as a way to propel the story. And that's actually a real central idea, that having hope and having optimism is as central as the scientific knowledge of knowing how to grow stuff on Mars, for example. It's a movie that has a great Matt Damon performance. I mean, he's literally carrying the film. It's a movie that shows how much of a movie star performance you can get, and how that really can elevate a film, and the charm that he brings, and the line readings, for example. And this is maybe not a movie like Snowpiercer, which is rich with symbolism that you can digest and put into a video essay. But it is showing a great performance and how that can really propel a film, and also an efficiency of storytelling. That this is a movie that has great setups, great payoffs. It's funny at times. There's smart lines of dialogue. It's over 2 hours but flies by. Not only is there sort of these humor moments, but also these realistic moments that come in and are very tense and suspenseful, that really Scott brings real sophistication to, but also allows those sort of light, airy moments to breathe. A great soundtrack, the great disco soundtrack, which is really awesome and propels the film. It's a movie I've seen a bunch of times. I saw it twice in theaters, and I've seen it a bunch of times since. And it's a great movie to rewatch, especially during these times. And it's a fun movie and so enjoyable. And you walk out of the theater, or you walk out of watching in your home, just a total smile on your face and belief in humanity. And it's so entertaining. And this has an entertaining, awesome blockbuster with this sort of rounded, realistic sci-fi element and a optimistic look at the future. It's an awesome time, and I'm glad there are movies like this because it makes you feel so great walking out. Then my final pick of the video, my Summer 7 pick, is Thor Ragnarok.
Here we go! I'm not a queen or a monster. I'm the goddess of death. What were you the god of again?
An awesome Marvel movie, and the key to the MCU series, because I think this was a period of time where people were interested in the main storyline, the sort of Captain America, Iron Man, Avengers main storyline, what worked for them, the success from the beginnings of the movies, from the beginnings of the MCU movies. But ever since that sort of disagreement that allowed Edgar Wright to drop off of the Ant-Man movie, it sort of put the futures of MCU in peril, because we weren't sure if young, great auteur kind of filmmakers would be joining the MCU, and they wouldn't be able to sort of bring their own style, that they'd have to be put into the system, and therefore that would be off-putting to upcoming filmmakers. But with the introduction of Taika Waititi for Thor Ragnarok, this movie, and then of course Ryan Coogler for Black Panther, I think that really sort of adjusted the film industry's expectations that you can still be someone with a unique voice and bring your sensibilities to the MCU universe and create a movie that is still your own within this system. And that's what Taika Waititi did. I mean, the first two Thor movies were not well liked. They're some of the least liked MCU movies. They allowed Thor to be probably the least liked Avenger coming into the 2012 Avengers movie. And I think that what Taika did was really totally reinvent this character. And while I actually like the second Thor movies better than the first, it's still in my bottom tier. But Thor Ragnarok is in my top tier. This is because Taika really just sort of didn't disrespect, I think, or didn't totally destroy the theory of the character, but totally made it his own. He got rid of the hair, he got rid of the hammer, he got rid of Asgard, he threw it all behind and said, you know, this is now Thor. He is completely lost without everything. He has to reinvent himself, and instead making Thor sort of using that sort of bratty, we'll call, self-confidence in the first movie to now a sort of funny self-confidence in now the third movie in the series. It uses it to him, his sort of over self-confident as a funny way when he actually fails and messes up, that he thinks he's Thor, the great Thor, and then isn't able to do it. But then, so sort of almost turns him to an underdog, puts him in a world he's unfamiliar with, and a classic sort of hero's journey kind of a tale. But it works because of Taika's unique, dry sensibility. He shows up as Korg, as a great, funny character, and allows all the characters to sort of be funny and odd and really embrace these sci-fi elements. Tessa Thompson shows she's like this badass action hero with some funny lines as well, and a total movie star. Jeff Goldblum is able to do his weird sort of sensual sensibilities. Cate Blanchett as Hela is now one of the best Marvel movies, purely based off her performance. And Loki shows up and does his shenanigans as well. And what I love about the movie, not only does it have a great ensemble cast and has this funny moments and some cool action, it's really because of its total commitment to the sci-fi elements. This is a fantasy sci-fi movie that is like Masters of the Universe, that is totally committed to it. It's not something like Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, which is realistic. It's the world, but what if there's a small thing? Or the Christopher Nolan movies, like, what if there was a guy in Batman that in a bat suit, but just in our real world? This is a far-flung galaxy, another place away, and unique, odd creatures and elements, and really brings that commitment to total sci-fi and realizes it, and then does that by having this pop sort of aesthetic with bright colors, with this unique, very 80s kind of neon sensibility, and allowing the bright colors of the costumes and the designs of the costumes, as well as the sort of sets that they're able to build. And they did build a lot of sets as well, of course, using CGI. Just some that allows some great visual imagery throughout the film that I just totally connected to. So the great humor, some fun action sequences, but really that sort of awesome soundtrack too. Different sort of needle drops of the immigrant song, and then that awesome just visual imagery that I haven't really seen in any of Taika's movies, and why this maybe is one of my favorite Taika movies because of what he's able to do with just the colors and the bright, gorgeous frames he's able to pull off here because of the budget and the world that was sort of shown on screen. That's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Stay tuned to next week for my picks from 6 to 2 sci-fi movies, sci-fi fantasy movies. That's about it. Until next time, stay tuned.